Hi everyone, my name is Nianqi, and together with Yoori and Joey, we're ProfMix. Today we're going to present you a bars for first year master student in IO program. First, I will start off by giving you a quick introduction to bars, and then Yoori and Joey will take over and walk you through the actual procedures and the resulting scale. So, BARS is short for Behaviorally Anchored Rating Scales. It's a set of vertical scales that cover various dimensions of performance and have behavior examples representative of each level of performance. Because it focuses on behavior, it helps the rater by kind of forcing them to think of actual behaviors rather than drawing on a general impression of the ratee, and therefore we could reduce rater biases such as leniency effect, halo effect, and so on. Bars can also be used to measure other things such as frequency of a behavior, importance, and so on. These are just some examples I listed here. We based our general procedures on Kell et al. 2017. And we will start off with critical incidents. We will recruit subject matter expert, and we will tell them to generate behaviors that are effective, ineffective, and merely satisfactory. And we want, as you can see, that we have so many people, like from 68 to like 500. Because we want to make sure that our scale covers pretty much everything, every single behavior that's relevant to performance. And how do we know that? Well, we look at the point where everything generated above that point is just redundant information, and that's the point of saturation, where we know that we pretty much have gathered all the information that's out there. Then step 2 is where we would edit those critical incidents into a common format. We'll then remove the redundant ones, and then we cluster them into categories of dimensions. And they should usually be between 5 to 10. And then we move on to step 3, where we will recruit a second group of SMEs, and we will give them the critical incidents and the dimensions from step 2, and we tell them to sort those incidents into the dimensions. As you can see, the number of SMEs drastically reduced because the task at hand is much simpler, and we don't need just 6 people to do the sorting. Then we'll just calculate the percentage of a dimension being chosen for a particular critical incident. And then we just discard everything that's all the critical incidents that's below this predetermined standard, and that's usually between 50 to 80. Moving on, we'll just recruit a third group of SMEs, and we'll give them the critical incidents and tell them to rate the effectiveness. And as you can see here, that we also don't have as many people as step 1, because, well, it's pretty similar to step 3. And in fact, we may even combine the 2 steps and basically have only one group of SMEs. Then we will just take the result of step 5, and we calculate the mean and standard deviation for each critical incident. And then we just discard. Well, then we just focus on the standard deviation, and then we discard everything that's above a predetermined standard. And then, finally, everything that survived step 4 and step 6 are going to be used in creating the bars. You could choose a subset, like 6 to 7, or you could use all of them. And the placement on the scale is determined by their mean from step 6. And that's all about the general procedures. As you see, what we did is a bit different. And well, I will just let Yoori and the Joey handle that part for me. So yeah.
My name is Yoori, and I will start by describing our procedure. Our focus was first year MA students majoring in IO psychology. And we had 2 dimensions of success: academic conduct, which was defined as behaviors that lead to the acquisition of academic knowledge and skills. And another one was communication, which is defined as behaviors concerned with establishing relationships and connections with peers and faculty members, communication and collaborations, and requisition and transmission of information. For step 1, we recruited 6 first-year MA students in George Mason University who are majoring in IO psychology. And the SMEs were asked to give responses to 3 questions. We asked them to list 5 behaviors that they would expect to see from a successful, failing, or average student, preferably that they have observed or done themselves. We used the term preferably because we were being flexible in generating the critical incidents due to small sample size. And one of our group members participated as an SME. If we had more resources such as time and money, we would recruit more SMEs, increase the sample size, so that we can improve the reliability and validity. We would gather at least several hundred critical incidents, and we would add additional steps before asking for behaviors. For example, we can ask SMEs to list qualities or characteristics and write general statements that define different levels of performance. Doing this would limit responses to actual behaviors, and we would avoid being an SME to prevent problems such as experimental bias. We may educate or specify what is behavior and what is not, because even for SMEs, they might not distinguish between behavior and attitude. We may use other sources to develop behavior anchors if that is a viable option. For example, in Georgenta and Broadback's article, they used video recordings from previous lab experiments. For step 2, we edited the critical incidents to common format, and we had 60 critical incidents after removing redundancy. And we found common themes relating to study and communicate. As mentioned in the previous slides, our 2 dimensions was academic conduct and communication. If you have more resources, we would generate more dimensions with more critical incidents, about 5 to 10, for better student performance measure overall. And we would try to balance the number of critical incidents for each dimensions, because we had a lot of critical incidents for academic conduct, but not a lot for communication. For step 3, we have recruited another 6 participants who were given the 2 dimensions and the definitions, and they were asked to assign each incident to the dimension that fits the best. If you had more resources, we would recruit SMEs with different perspectives, such as professors and TAs, and we would enable the SMEs to suggest a new dimension for the critical incident in the other section, so that they can help us create more dimensions. For step 4, we discarded the critical incidents that were listed on the left, because they failed to meet the predetermined agreement standard. And the minimum standard of agreement was set at 5 out of 6 people, which is 83.3%. And this is what we have with academic conduct, and this is what we had for communication. Now Joey would continue to step 5.
Hello, Joey here. I will be discussing steps 5 through 7 as well as our final product. Now, for step 5, we had the SMEs from step 3 rate the effectiveness of the incidents on a 1 to 5 scale. If we had more time and money, then it might have been a better idea to use a 7 or 9 point scale to offer more choice to the SMEs. We also could have had our SMEs evaluate our critical incidents on frequency and importance to gain more insight into the effectiveness of the CIs. Finally, I would also like to say that we should have used a different set of SMEs than the people we had for step 3. That was a bit of an oversight on our part. Moving on to step 6, we established agreement between the SMEs on the effectiveness of the critical incidents. This was done by taking the data collected in step 5 and removing any CIs that didn't have high levels of agreement between SMEs. We measured this by taking standard deviations from every CI rating in step 5. Now, the CIs that we removed were submits assignment right before deadline, invests little effort when doing assignments, does not engage in team projects and classwork, interacts with people only if necessary, rarely interacts with professors and peers, and disrespects students or faculty members. After much consideration, we decided to discard any CI with a standard deviation greater than 1. This cutoff point wasn't based on, it was ultimately arbitrary. It wasn't based on some sort of advanced, arcane statistical knowledge. We also considered a standard deviation cutoff point of 0.75, but we decided that it was too restrictive as it would have forced us to throw out roughly twice as many CIs. I believe that if we were operating under more ideal circumstances, and by that I mean more SMEs and more CIs, we probably could have gotten that cutoff point below 1.0 without having to throw out too many too many CIs. And now we're on to step 7, which is our final results. Now, this is one of our categories, the final CIs for one of our categories, academic conduct. Now, as you can see, there are many CIs, too many to list, actually. So I'm just going to give you the highlights. On the low end 1, we have CIs that reflect poor academic conduct, such as never submits assignments on time, plagiarizes when doing assignments. And on the high end 5, we have stuff like always completes assignments on time and utilizes on-campus resources such as library or writing center. Moving on, we have our second category, communication. And as you can see, there are much less CIs for this than the previous category. But it's organized just the same way. On the low end, you have stuff like never participates in class assignments, and on the high end, we have contacts professor for career-wise support and advice. Now, one thing that we could fix in a more ideal circumstance would be having more CIs in this category, and this might be done with more SMEs and more CIs in the earlier steps. Finally, I would like to state that all of the group members have participated in the development of the surveys, bars, data analysis, and recruitment process equally. We were responsible for creating and presenting our own share of slides, and this sentence confirms that the work was divided equally amongst the group members. And here are references, and that should conclude the presentation. Thank you for listening.